Homework number 10. In the first section, when we're solving for x, we use inverse operations. Now you can start by subtracting 2x from both sides, therefore eliminating the x's and creating a statement that is not true. And anytime you have a statement that is not true, there is no solution. Another way that you can answer this question is to identify that you have the same variable term, but that you have different constants. And anytime you have the same variable term, you will have a special solution. But if you have different constants, that means there is no solution. Let's take a look at the second question. This one has some coefficients that are fractions, so you'll likely want to use a calculator. I'm going to add 2/7 x on both sides. Then I'm going to open the TI-30 XS calculator that we have listed in the Google Classroom. When using this calculator, it's fastest to type a fraction using this button here. What I want to type is the fraction 3/4 and then add 2/7. So first I'll type a 3, then a 4. Then I need to arrow out of this fraction, and then I'm going to press the addition sign and press the next fraction button, 2/7. After I press enter, I will get my new fraction, 29/28. So 29/28 x minus 9 is equal to 6. I'm going to add 9 to both sides, leaving me with 29/28 x equals 15. Now when you want to isolate a variable that has a fraction as a coefficient, you have two choices. You can divide by that fraction, like this, or you can multiply by the reciprocal of that fraction. That's when you take the fraction and you flip the numerator and denominator. I'm going to use this technique because it is easier to type in my calculator. So 15 times 28/29. And that will get my x all by itself. So I'm going to clear my calculator and type 15 times and enter that fraction button again. 28/29. That leaves me with 420/29. Now, although this answer is correct, and you could leave it in this format, if this was a multiple choice question, the choices might be written as a mixed number. And how we do that is to go back to our calculator and tell the calculator we want to convert this fraction into a mixed number. We're going to use this button right here, ND, right, regular fraction, and then these arrows turn it into a unit and a fraction. That's a mixed number. Because it's written in green, I have to press my green key first. And then I will type or click this button here with the times 10 sign. There's my original fraction, and now it says converted from one to the other. Press enter, and there's your mixed number, 14 14/29. All right, let's take a look at the last question here. The last question has an x that's almost by itself, but it has power. And that exponent is known as a cube, or third power. And the inverse of a cube is known as a cube root, which is different than a square root. So on your calculator, there are two buttons, one for a square root and one for any other root number. In this case, we want a 3 in that position. So let's take a look at our calculator. I'll clear everything out. And over here, I have an x squared button, and the opposite of x squared is a square root. You see it in green. But we don't have a power of 2. We have a power of 3. So right above this key is the exponent button. And you'll notice above it, it has an x and then a root sign. and that x indicates you could put any number you want there. So when I go back to my question here, if I want to get x by itself, then in order to undo this cube sign, I need to use a cube root. And what you do to one side, you must also do to the other. That's what allows the x to become alone or isolated. So now we want to type this in our calculator, the cube root of 8. So we have to press the 3 first so that the calculator knows what number root we want. Press the green button and the exponent key to get that root sign. Enter the radicand, which is 8, and there's your response. So x is equal to 2. For the second section, we need to find the rate of change, also known as the slope, for each graph. The slope is the ratio of the rise between 2 points and the run, often known as the delta y divided by delta x. Now for us, the first thing we want to do is make sense of the direction. Is this line going uphill or downhill? Does it have a positive slope or a negative slope? So if you imagine yourself reading this graph and you are traveling along this line, you would be going down. That means that this has a negative slope. So first thing I'm going to do is write a negative sign so that I remember that my slope fraction has to be a negative number. Now in order to get the fraction, I need to count the rise and run between two perfect corner points. In order to do that accurately, I typically draw the slope triangle here along the grid lines. It's a right triangle that connects one point to the other, and it doesn't matter if the triangle is below the line like this, or if the triangle is above the line like that. It does not matter, as long as you are traveling along these grid lines and making a right triangle. So for us, we will count the rise first. That is the distance vertically from the lower point to the upper point, or the upper point down to the lower point. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units here, so our rise is 5. So we'll put that in the numerator. And now our run is 1, 2, 3, 4 boxes long, so we will put that in our denominator. And because the line is tilting down, the answer is a negative fraction. For this next question here, I'm going to draw the rise along this grid line here, and the run along that grid line, giving me that perfect right angle. So my line is going uphill, so my fraction will be positive. Now let's count that rise value. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And the run, 1, 2, 3. This last one is one of the special lines. You'll notice it is perfectly vertical, straight up and down. So you may have this memorized. But even if you didn't, you would notice that we can't draw a triangle between these 2 points, because it only has a rise. It does not have a run. And no matter what 2 points you picked, you could pick these 2 points, which have a rise of 4. You could put these 2 points, which have a rise of 6. It doesn't matter, because anytime you divide by 0, you're going to get an error on your calculator. Let's see. 6 divided by 0. You get divide by 0 error, because you can't divide by 0, and that's because the slope is undefined. So anytime you get the word error on your calculator, you know that that means that the slope is undefined. Whoops. And if you imagine Slope Dude skiing on this hill, that's exactly what he would say as he's falling down. The next section asks you to identify first the slope number, which is the coefficient of x, and then the y-intercept, which is the constant, as long as the sentence is in slope-intercept form, which means as long as y is by itself. So let's take a look at the first sentence here. Y is by itself, and so the coefficient of x is -4, the constant is positive 7. For number 8, the coefficient of x is 6, and the constant is positive 8. For number 9, the coefficient is 2, and the constant here is minus 1. And in the last one, the slope is negative 2, and the y-intercept is 3/5. For this question, they ask you to find the rate of change between these 2 points. And rate of change is found by using this slope formula, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Labeling your points will help. Once your points are labeled, you start with your giant subtraction fraction, and you put the numbers in the right places. So 5 1/4, and then y1 is 4 1/2. x2 is 3, and x1 is 2. Now you can use your calculator to compute this, each item by itself, or you could do some of the math in your head mentally. So 5 1/4 minus 4 1/2. So I'm going to open that calculator. I'm going to enter my fraction button. And in the top of my fraction, even if I wanted to do the whole fraction, I could. In the top, I can put another fraction. I believe it was 5 1/4. So actually I need 5, a mixed number, and 1/4. Subtract another mixed number, 4 1/2. I can enter that whole fraction in my calculator if I wish. So the answer is 3/4. So we got here 0.75 at the top. I can erase all of this if I don't want to do it piece by piece. And my final answer is 3/4. For this last section, it asks you to complete the table of values and graph the equations on the coordinate plane below. So you'll notice in these tables, I left a workspace for you where you can complete the work for each function. So an input is given on the left side here, and the input goes into the x position. So -3 times the input plus 1. -3 times the input plus 1. -3 times the input plus 1. You're going to do that every time for each number separately. You can pick up your calculator and you can type exactly the characters that you see. So when I clear up my calculator, I'm going to type -3 parentheses -2 parentheses plus 1. Press enter, and I get a 7. I'm going to do the same thing for the middle input, and then the same thing for the last input. Once you're done, you can graph each of these points. -2, 7 is a point. 0, 1 is a point. 3, -8 is a point. And if you do this correctly, each of these points will line up as a straight line. Let's take a look at the next question. So we have 1/2 times our input plus 4. 1/2 times our input plus 4. Each time you will write the different inputs. And then each time you can use your calculator to compute. 1/2 parentheses -4 plus 4. 1/2 parentheses -4 plus 4. I got a 2. And each time I can compute. When I'm done, I graph all 3 points. So -4, 2, 0, 4, and 2, 5. Here we go. Extend it and draw some arrows. Okay, the last one here is y equals 4x. This is a very short formula. My inputs are -1, 0, and 1, and my outputs are -4, 0, and 4. So my points are -1, -4, 0, 0, and 1, 4. Connect here and draw your arrows. The final question asks you to determine what value of x makes this equation shown below true. So all you need to do is solve for x. And when we solve for a variable, we get the variable alone. So I'm going to distribute this here. 1/3 times 2x is 2/3 x. Use a calculator if you need to. 1/3 times -6 is -2. I'm done distributing on the left side. Now I'm going to distribute on the right side. 4x minus 8. I'm going to combine like terms here, giving me 2/3 x plus 2 equals 4x minus 8. I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides, giving me 2/3 x equals 4x minus 10. I'm going to subtract 4x on both sides, and now I'm going to pick up my calculator. 2/3 minus 4. 2/3 minus 4, and I get -10/3. So -10/3 x equals -10. Now you can either divide both sides by -10/3, leaving the fraction the way that it is, but for me, I prefer to multiply by the reciprocal. That cancels out my coefficient, and you can use a calculator if you need to here. -10 times -3 is 30. 30 divided by 10 is 3. And that concludes homework number 10.